Hello and welcome to another Infinity Tactics video. This is not about game tactics per se, rather trying to disprove my notion that I have unlucky dice rolls, and probably can be related to other players' experiences when playing Infinity too. We all have experienced this in some way and may be supported by our personal experience that some players appear to be better in succeeding with their dice rolls than others. So in this video, let's look at what gives myself and perhaps other players this perception, what type of biases we use to justify our thinking, and whether it is a true statement or not that unlucky dice rolls are just that, unlucky. Firstly, I'll explain some common biases and mental heuristics I think that contribute to my perception of unlucky dice. One is negativity bias. Negativity bias explains that negative events or feelings typically have a more significant impact on our psychological state than positive events or feelings, even when they are of equal proportion. Negativity bias is closely linked to loss aversion, which is another cognitive bias that describes why the pain of losing is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. Loss aversion. Loss aversion is a cognitive bias which explains that individuals feel the pain of loss twice as intensely than the equivalent pleasure of gain. As a result of this, individuals tend to try to avoid losses in whatever way possible. Many of the most important decisions an individual will face will require incurring losses. Loss aversion can be prevented from making the best decisions, can prevent people from making the best decisions for themselves to avoid risk or failure. Although being risk adverse is useful in many situations, it can prevent many people from making logical choices. One cause of this is our brains. 3 specific regions of the human brain become activated in situations involving loss aversion. The amygdala is a part of our brain which processes fear. For example, the amygdala creates an automated, pre-conscious sense of anxiety when we see a snake. The reaction we experience with loss in this part of our brain is similar to our brain's response to when we react to airplane turbulence or a spider, meaning fear and loss are closely related. The second region in our brain that is activated when we process a loss is the striatum. The striatum region handles prediction errors in our minds and helps us become better at predicting things. The striatum shows activity when we experience both losses and their equivalent gains, but is more aroused during losses. The striatum helps us avoid losses in the future. Finally, our brain's insular area reacts to disgust and works with the amygdala to make individuals avoid certain types of behavior. Neuroscientists have noted that the insular region is highly aroused when responding to loss. The higher the prospect of loss, the more activated the insular region becomes compared to an equivalent gain. Though there are many other aspects of the brain that contribute, these 3 regions are significant when processing a loss and add to how individuals respond to these losses. Depending on the strength of these regions, individuals may be more or less loss averse. For example, when presented with an opportunity to win either $150 or lose $100 with equal probability, studies have found that many people choose not to take this opportunity because the risk of losing $100 is too great. Even though the expected return, in this case, is positive, the benefit should objectively outweigh the cost. This strong sensation of loss leads to attentional bias. Attentional bias. Attentional bias describes how we often direct our attention to some things more than others. When we are making decisions, this can cause us to fixate on a small subset of data points and ignore the rest. Our attention is a finite resource. Focusing on one thing comes at the expense of others. Faced with a massive amount of incoming information every second, our brains are constantly trying to figure out what is most worthy of our concentration. Some stimuli that tend to bias our attention, such as hunger and anxiety, likely have evolutionary roots. Other times, our attention can be biased by cognitive schemas that we have acquired over the course of our lives. It can also make it more difficult for us to let go of distracting or unhelpful thoughts, causing us instead to fixate on and overthink certain things. For example, by focusing more on the number of losses I experience in my dice rolls than the wins, I'll reinforce the idea that I have unlucky dice rolls, thus strengthening this idea. And this leads to the availability heuristic. The availability heuristic describes a mental shortcut where we make decisions based on emotional cues, familiar facts, and vivid images that leave an easily recalled impression in our minds. The brain tends to minimize the effort necessary to complete routine tasks. When making decisions, especially ones involving probability, certain memories and knowledge jump out to replace the complicated task of calculating statistics. Some memories leave a lasting impression because they are connected to emotions. The availability heuristic has serious consequences in most professional fields and many aspects of one's daily life. People make thousands of decisions per day, and factors such as media coverage, emotional reactions, and vivid images have greater influence than they would in an entirely rational calculation. The negative emotions linked to losing dice rolls, along with a tendency to focus on only losses, strengthens the emotional link of my memories. This makes recalling from memory dice roll losses more easily than successes, and this contributes to my confirmation bias. Confirmation bias describes the underlying tendency to notice, focus on, and give greater credence to evidence that fits with our existing beliefs. This bias can lead people to make poor decisions because it distorts the reality from which we draw evidence. Under experimental conditions, decision makers tend to actively seek information and assign greater value to evidence confirming their existing beliefs rather than entertaining new ones. This can be considered a form of bias in evidence collection. Conclusions drawn from biased evidence are more likely to be false than those we draw from objective evidence. A consequence is that it makes me feel good about myself. Another reason people sometimes show confirmation bias is that it protects one's self-esteem. No one likes feeling bad about themselves, and realizing that a belief we value is false can have this effect. Deeply held views often form our identities, so disproving them can sometimes be painful. We might even believe being wrong suggests we lack intelligence. As a result, we often look for information that supports rather than disproves our existing beliefs. Now you know what biases and heuristics contribute to my idea that I have unlucky dice rolls. So what I plan to do is capture information about my dice rolls and analyze them. I have recorded 3 different games, noting all the dice roll types and outcomes for each round for each game. By collecting evidence of the results, I can hopefully dispel my thoughts and have a better perception of playing Infinity. Perhaps even breaking me from focusing on dice rolls and focusing more on making better tactical decisions and not having high expectations of the dice rolls. But what if I am wrong? What if the evidence does show that most of my outcomes are negative and I do have more losses than wins compared to my opponent? Would this mean that I am correct, that I am really unlucky in this game of chance? So this will be the design for recording every dice roll in the game. In the center will be the type of dice roll and whether it is a face-to-face or normal roll. The number in square brackets is the success value calculated after applying mods. The number of dice are represented by the number of octagon shapes. The letter P means dice that scored below and pass the success value, or above for armor rolls. The letter F means dice that failed to score below the success value. The green coloured octagon is the dice that won the roll and determined the outcome. In this simple example, players are facing off against each other in a shooting match. The 3 dice on the left is active players' outcomes against the opponent's single arrow dice on the right. The opponent in this example did score a pass, meaning they scored below their success value. However, the active player's single pass scored higher than the opponent but still under their success value, thus winning the dice roll. I will tally the dice results for each round and a total for each game. I will include a final result for all 3 games. I will record the total number of dice rolled, passes and fails for each individual player, and the wins and losses for each roll. Once the results are in, perhaps I can gain a better understanding. My hypothesis is, during any single game in Infinity, for every dice roll that determines the outcome of a single order, most dice rolls fail to achieve their success value, resulting in losing more outcomes than my opponent. The null hypothesis is the opposite of what I have claimed and generally is the expected outcome. The null hypothesis is, during any single game in Infinity, for every dice roll that determines the outcome of a single order, dice rolls equally fail or pass the success value, resulting in equal outcomes for me and my opponent. This means that for me to validate my hypothesis, I must use evidence to disprove the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is held to be true and needs to be falsified using the evidence collected in this series of recorded games. So the expected outcome is I will collect evidence that supports the null hypothesis, that the dice rolls are equal and there is a clean 50% chance of both winning and losing. If the evidence I collect falsifies the null hypothesis, then my claim that I am unlucky in dice rolls is correct. Infinity is a game where the only control a player has is the decisions one makes. Unlike life, where skill and experience influence the outcome of a decision, in Infinity, chance is used instead. This is the only aspect of the game where a player has no control or influence on the outcome of their decisions. This can lead to frustration and certain beliefs about the game. Hopefully, by completing this process, I can gain an accurate and based opinion about my expectations. I can update my beliefs and opinions based on real-world evidence. These are the 3 missions that I played. Superiority is the original direct action playstyle. Resources and Dread Space I've modified to a direct action playstyle, meaning they have no classified objectives or HVTs. I was originally thinking of just playing Battleground 3 times, but then I thought that would be very boring. Besides, since when does anyone play the same mission 3 times in a row? To be more aligned with expectations, I would rather test my idea against different scenarios. The dice are not affected by the scenario type, only my decision-making process and the trooper profile stats. The dice rolls will be what they are. What will influence the dice rolls will be the trooper selection in my lists. So for all 3 missions, my opponent and I will be using the same lists. I think trooper selection has more influence because of the game stats for troopers. For example, different BS attack stats will incur different success values between rolls. The same applies to CC attack, dodge, whip rolls, etc. My list for this fun experiment is on the left, and my opponent is on the right. Now, let's look at the dice rolls during the game and the results. The first game in my experiment is Superiority. So I'll keep the information displayed for a few seconds. Feel free to pause the video to help read the dice outcomes. In this example, the bottom dice outcome is unique. Direct template weapons hit without requiring a dice roll. This template was from my heckler using an Errata. My opponent decided to risk it and hack the console, making the roll a normal roll and not a face-to-face roll. And as you can see, the result ends up being a fail. For the ARM and BTS rolls, the success value is the weapon's damage. The dice rolls are considered a pass if the total armor from the trooper and partial cover added to the dice rolls allow the total score to be higher than the damage. So an F means the dice were not high enough to get the score above the success value, which in this case for the BTS roll is 13. For the bottom dice outcome, my opponent's passes are higher than mine, so my opponent wins the outcome, with the critical being the key dice in this outcome. Even though I score 2 passes for my arm roll, the one fail results in my trooper taking a wound and entering unconscious state, meaning I fail this dice outcome. These are the results for end of round 1. During this round, I rolled a total of 15 dice. 9 dice passed while 6 failed, giving me a 6% pass rate for this round. I had a total of 8 dice outcomes, 4 of which I won and 4 of which I lost. And I had a 50% win rate this round. My opponent rolled a total of 17 dice, 7 were passes and 10 were fails, giving her a 41% pass rate this round. My opponent had a total of 11 dice outcomes, 4 were wins and 7 were losses. My opponent had a 63% loss rate this round. For the discover outcome, I used 2 troopers, hence why there are 2 success values, one for the different troopers, with the pass going to the success value of 13 and the fail for the 8. bottom dice outcome is two fire teams attacking each other. Two craziers from my opponent engage my fire team. My entire fire team declared dodge. The Grenzer has a face-to-face dodge against the two craziers, while the Sakura Hz perform a normal dodge roll. And the results are as displayed. These are the results for round 2. I rolled a total of 18 dice, with 9 passing and 9 failing the success value, giving me a 50% pass rate this round. I rolled a total of 14 dice outcomes, with 6 wins and 8 losses, giving me a 57% loss rate this round. My opponent rolled a total of 25 dice this round, with 10 passes and 15 fails. My opponent had a 60% fail rate this round. My opponent rolled a total of 14 dice outcomes with 7 wins and 7 losses, giving her a 50% win rate for this round. The results for the rolls for round 3. These are the results for round 3. I rolled a total of 7 dice with 5 passing and 2 failing, giving me a 71% pass rate this round. I rolled a total of 6 dice outcomes with 4 wins and 2 losses, giving me a 67% win rate this round. My opponent rolled a total of 14 dice this round, with 6 passes and 8 fails, giving her a 57% fail rate this round. My opponent rolled a total of 9 dice outcomes with 1 win and 8 losses, giving her an 88% loss rate this round. So these are the total results for the entire game. I rolled 40 dice in total with 23 passing and 17 failing, giving me a 50.5% pass rate overall. I rolled a total of 28 dice outcomes with 14 wins and 14 losses, making it a 50% rate for either outcome. My opponent rolled a total of 56 dice this game, with 23 passing and 33 failing, giving her a 41% pass rate overall. My opponent rolled 34 dice outcomes, with 12 wins and 22 losses, giving her a 35% win rate overall. So the endgame results are more accurate than the round-by-round results. As we saw, there was fluctuation between each round. The total results for the entire game provide a more accurate result of the dice outcomes. It looked like I had favourable results for this game. My opponent was not so lucky. So despite the dice rolls, we both ended on a draw for this mission. We both scored 4 objective points each. I had the higher army points. It appears that I had better success at passing my rolls to kill my opponent's troopers. My opponent looks like they had unlucky dice when trying to pass their arm and BTS saves for her troopers. However, this is only the first game. There are 2 more to conduct and things may change, and at the end I'll do an overall score of all the dice rolled for all 3 games and all the dice outcomes, and we'll have to look at the global average or the larger average and see how that ends up. For my second game, I played Resources. Again, I will hold over the slides for a few seconds before continuing. So for armor and BTS rolls, the damage of the weapon is the success value. The total from the trooper's armor, partial cover, and dice value must be higher than the success value, and all dice must pass to consult a win for this dice outcome. The middle dice outcome is when the Heckler engaged a Teutonic Knight Lieutenant with an Emerat. In return, the Heckler received 2 shotgun hits in blast mode and 1 combi rifle hit. The following arm rolls were terrible. BTS role was for the Teutonic Knight Lieutenant. Because he was a heavy infantry, he failed and entered both the isolated and immobilized B state. The middle dice outcome was between a Teutonic Knight against my fire team. The reset was for my opponent's lieutenant trying to cancel the states. The second and third dice outcomes look like it does not make sense, but it does. It involves an enemy trooper moving into a shock mine range. The arm roll was caused by the shock mine exploding. And my trooper fanning the attack against my opponent's trooper and entering the unconscious state. So for round 1, I rolled a total of 16 dice with 4 passes and 27 fails. I had a 25% pass rate this round. My opponent rolled a total of 19 dice with 7 passes and 12 fails. She had a 37% pass rate. For the dice outcomes, I rolled 12 with 4 wins and 8 losses, giving me a 33% win rate for this round. My opponent rolled 14 with 6 wins and 8 losses, giving her a 43% win rate. The first dice outcomes for round 2 were a critical mistake on my part. I could have played this better, but unfortunately I did not. Instead of a dodge, I should have done a BS attack and return. I had 4 combi rifle shots against my opponent's 1 Panzerfaust shot. I was very glad to have survived all these arm rolls. And another repeated outcome as well. So for round 2 results, I rolled a total of 27 dice with 18 passes and 9 fails. I had a 67% pass rate this round. My opponent rolled a total of 16 dice with 10 passes and 6 fails, and she had a pass rate of 63% this round. For the dice outcomes, I rolled 16 in total with 7 wins and 9 losses, giving me a 44% win rate this round. And for my opponent, they rolled 6 in total with 5 wins and 1 loss, giving her an 83% win rate this round. So my opponent decides to end the round here. There is nothing further to be gained from the game. So for round 3, I rolled a total of 11 dice with 10 passes and 1 fail, giving me a 91% pass rate for this round. My opponent rolled 12 dice in total with 8 passes and 4 fails, giving her a 67% pass rate for this round. For the dice outcomes, I rolled for 5 dice outcomes with a 4 win 1 loss ratio and had an 80% win rate this round. And my opponent rolled 7 outcomes with 3 wins and 4 losses, giving her a 43% win rate for this round. So here's the results for the entire game overall. I rolled a total of 54 dice. I had 32 passes and 22 fails. This gave me overall a 59% pass rate. For the dice outcomes, I rolled 33 dice outcomes in total, with 15 wins and 18 losses, giving me a 45% win rate this round. My opponent rolled a total of 48 dice, with 26 passes and 22 fails. Overall, she had a 54% pass rate. My opponent rolled a total of 27 dice outcomes. 14 of those were wins and 13 were losses, and she had a 52% win rate for this game. Now, the objective points for this mission resulted in a major win for my opponent. It was 8-0 to military orders. Now, onto the third and last game. Game 3 and the final game in this experiment. Dread Space is a modified direct action style of Panic Room. So as again, I'll just hold on the slides for a few seconds just so you can see the rolls and the dice results. So this round, I rolled a total of 11 dice with 4 passes and 7 fails, giving me a 36% pass rate. My opponent rolled 18 dice with 10 passes and 8 fails, giving her a pass rate of 56%. I rolled for 5 dice outcomes with 3 wins and 2 losses, giving me a win rate of 60% this round. My opponent rolled 10 dice outcomes with 6 wins and 4 losses, giving her a win rate of 60%. For round 2, I rolled 17 dice with 11 passes and 6 fails, giving me a 65% pass rate. My opponent rolled 20 dice with 8 passes and 12 fails, giving her a pass rate of 40%. I rolled for 7 dice outcomes with 4 wins and 3 losses, giving me a 57% win rate this round. For my opponent, she rolled 12 dice outcomes with 3 wins and 9 losses, giving her a 25% win rate. For round 3, so for the final round of the entire experiment, I rolled 13 dice with 5 passes and 8 fails. I had a 38% pass rate. My opponent rolled 5 dice with 2 passes and 3 fails, and she had a 40% pass rate. I rolled 11 dice outcomes with 5 wins and 6 losses, giving me a 45% win rate. My opponent rolled for 3 dice outcomes with 1 win and 2 losses, giving her a 33% win rate. So for game 3, the final total results for the game, I rolled a total of 41 dice this game with 20 passes and 21 fails. Overall, I had a 49% pass rate for this game. My opponent rolled a total of 43 dice with 20 passes and 23 fails. She had a 47% pass rate overall this game. For the dice outcomes, I rolled a total of 23 with 12 wins and 11 losses, giving me a 52% win rate for this game. My opponent rolled a total of 25 with 10 wins and 15 losses, giving her a 40% win rate this overall game. So for this game, I achieved a minor victory, as I scored 5 objective points to my opponent's 3. It was a fun and tight game. Either of us could have won either way, and as you can see the dice results, it was quite a close game. And now we'll go on to the conclusion. Okay, so we'll go through the final results of all the game dice outcomes and dice rolls, and just a quick discussion on what I found out during this little fun experiment. So I'll start with a caveat. I think I miscounted the total dice rolled. I used the total from the passes and fails to get the correct number. I think I made a mistake in the first game recording, so apologies for that, but the numbers you see here are accurate based off the passes and fails totaled together. Moving on, I collected 2 sets of data for this experiment. The first set is the number of dice rolls and how many passed or failed the success value, and the second set was how many dice outcomes played and how many were wins or losses. The larger the number of passes should contribute towards increasing wins for dice outcomes. As you can see, it was a close result overall. I scored more passes than my opponent in total. However, the dice outcomes is where it really matters. That is because the dice results decide the success or failure of a decision made when spending an order. I rolled a total of 84 outcomes and my opponent rolled 86, so it was quite close over all 3 games. I scored a 49% win rate for my opponent. I scored a 49% win rate and my opponent scored a 42% win rate. Only a 7% difference between our results. These results surprised me. I was expecting to have a larger failure and loss rate. The percentages show an almost even split for both sets of data for both of us. So, in the discussion, what did I learn? I was wrong about my opinion that I have unlucky dice. Looking at the total results, it showed me that the outcomes for success or failure is close to 50%, meaning chance has a lot to do with determining the outcome of every decision. I cannot blame my dice for what happens. I can only blame myself for making poor decisions or not using the triggers effectively given their skills and equipment. Infinity is a balanced game. If you look at our lists, you could be forgiven that the military orders would be a stronger list with heavy infantry and higher support weapon costs in a 150-point game. My list was mostly light infantry with 1 medium infantry. I had no high burst weapons at all. Despite this, the game does tend to be balanced when it comes to dice rolls. Having higher stats on trooper profiles does have some importance. However, the dice show that it does not always mean success. I was in plenty of face-to-face situations which statistically I should have failed rather than won, yet it did not play out this way. The dice determine the outcomes for most tactical decisions. It is good to have multiple paths to execute and complete objectives. If one battle plan stops because of failed dice rolls, it is a good idea to have another trooper ready and capable of completing an objective or a part of your battle plan. Overly relying on a few tough troopers to do the heavy lifting in a mission can result in one's battle plan failing. It is good practice to have multiple troopers that can achieve some measure of effect during a game. Now I will go through some limitations of this little experiment. So we only used a 150-point army list and game size for this fun experiment. What this means is that there's less orders and engagements that require dice rolls. Obviously a bigger sized list and a bigger game table will involve more opportunities for dice rolls and thus more data points to compare. The 3 games is obviously not enough. There are a limited number of engagements that require dice rolls per game. To observe a more accurate result, perhaps playing 10 games would show a more even result. A more accurate way to conduct this little experiment would be to play 10 missions at 400 points. This would create a larger number of engagements that require dice rolls. More dice rolls means greater accuracy in results, and perhaps it would demonstrate an even 50-50 split. Who knows? So that was a fun little experiment. It certainly has changed my perspective on the game. It has provided me with a greater depth to the mechanics and understanding of how to play Infinity better. While I was surprised to be proven wrong, it has also been a relief. I can now focus more on making better decisions, think about what troopers are needed to accomplish missions, and what other ways I can use to overcome an opponent. Please feel free to share your thoughts and opinions about this. Are there any other things to contribute to the game? Would another person like to replicate this using more games with larger lists? And is Infinity a balanced game or not? Let me and others know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.